Hello, welcome back to another movie review stream. My name is Mark McPherson, film critic for movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, twincitiesgeek.com, and a whole bunch of other places that I usually write for. So, a little bit of everything we do. Alright, so it's been a while since we've covered a few movies, and there's a lot to catch up on. It's the end of May, which means we're pretty much at the start of like summer movie season right now. So some of the big blockbusters are coming up, so we're going to be covering a few tonight on the show. We're going to be covering The Little Mermaid, obviously coming out in theaters this weekend. We're also going to be the latest Disney live-action remake, obviously. We'll also be covering Fast X, the 10th entry in the Fast and the Furious franchise. And then we will be covering You Hurt My Feelings, which is an A24 dramedy that's coming out. Actually, I'm pretty sure it's coming out this weekend. I thought it was the weekend before, but that's not. And then we will also cover VHS 99, and if the latest horror film in the VHS franchise. And if I feel like it, if I have it in me, we'll cover the new White Man Can't Jump. That came out I believe last weekend over on Hulu. So we'll talk about all that. So yeah, we got a lot to talk about. I guess I could give a little bit of update on some of the videos that we're doing right now, just because I know like the autism videos have been getting a lot of traction lately. Due in one part because of Autism Awareness Month that happened, and the other part because of the meme of The Good Doctor, which I don't care for that. So I've decided that I'm going to be working on another I'm going to be working on an autism coding video after that. But we'll get to that later. Let's cover the new movies this week. But before we get to that, I'll just, call the action, subscribe, and like if you like all this crap. But another thing that I want to do that I haven't done on stream in a while. I used to do this for a bit, but for some reason I just dropped off it, mostly because I didn't have time. But I thought I'd go back to making some streaming recommendations. Because I used to love doing that, like, give people recommendations where if they can't get out to the theater, they can check out something streaming at home. But, like, nowadays, like, it's like half the films I'm talking about are streaming right now, so... but I thought I'd give an update just for some films that people have been meaning to catch up on. So if you go over to like Paramount Plus right now, you can check out Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I've already talked about this on my channel. I absolutely love this film. It takes like kind of the Guardians of the Galaxy approach to Dungeons and Dragons, and makes it a whole lot of fun. I really enjoyed this film. I don't know if it's probably going to be one of my favorites of the year, but it's definitely up there. So if you haven't seen it, it's on Paramount Plus right now. Over on Prime Video, there is a great documentary called Pennywise, the story of It, and it's a documentary specifically about the It miniseries. And yes, in case you're wondering, and they kind of advertise it on like the poster here, but there are interviews with Tim Curry, and he talks a lot about working on It. It's a fascinating documentary. If you have not seen it yet, it's on Prime Video. It won the Chainsaw Award last weekend from the Shudder Awards for Best Horror Documentary. So definitely go check it out. I had a lot of fun watching it. And I thought I'd recommend something older because I like doing that as well. So go over to the Criterion channel and you can check out a bunch of films from Seijun Suzuki. It's, I believe it's his 100th birthday this month. So if you have never seen Seijun Suzuki film, he's a very rebellious Japanese director. He's directed tons of wild stuff, including one film, I believe it's called Branded to Kill, that actually got him like kicked out of the Japanese film industry for like a decade. It's very wild and it's like very surreal, so I'm reluctant to recommend it. So I'm going to recommend, as you can see here, Tokyo Drifter. Tokyo Drifter is arguably one of his better films. It's a great neo-noir film about like Yakuza. It's beautifully shot. It's gritty. It's got some fantastic gunfights in there. And just the atmosphere is so wonderful. So if you've never seen a Seijun Suzuki film, that would probably be the one to start with. And that's over on the Criterion channel right now. So if you're stuck at... Oh, that's the wrong one. So if you're stuck at home, those some recommendations. And also, if you want to check out the written reviews of everything that I'm doing here, you can check them out at moviesmark.com, filmnerdandcareer.com, and twincitiesgeek.com. All right, so let's get the notes up here. And let's get the right subtitle, because we got to talk about the big film coming out this weekend, of course, The Little Mermaid, latest Disney live-action remake, live-action CGI hybrid, I guess I refer to. Like, because, like, everyone wants to, like, refer to it as, like, you know, like, they're CGI remakes or they're live-action remakes, and some are and some are not. So, and this is like a little mixture of both. So let me get the notes up here. So make sure I got all the cast names in front of me. Okay. And here we go. In 3, 2, 1. So, The Little Mermaid is the latest Disney remake. The live-action CGI remakes that we've seen Disney do with all their, their biggest library. And I guess at this point, having sat through so many of these films, like, they generally fall into, like, one of two camps. And that's usually either, it's a film that, like, diminishes, so much of what the original animated film was trying to do, and just being a tolerable and, like, decent, like, cover song of the original animated film. And it kind of goes back and forth there. Like, I didn't really feel like Dumbo said anything, but, parts of Aladdin were bearable. Of course, it has the problems of, adding in scenes that add nothing and musical numbers that aren't that meaningful. So Little Mermaid definitely does fall. The good news is that Little Mermaid falls into the bearable camp. It's like, if that's your range right now, it's in, like, the decent category, but, like, on the furthest, like, brink of, like, the decent category. It's like, if it could just escape, like, a few of the trappings that usually happen with these Disney remakes, it might actually be a great film. Because, like, it comes very close to having kind of, like, what I would kind of like to see out of a Little Mermaid film. Because, like, everyone's been talking about this. The biggest saving grace of the film, the number one reason to go see this film, is for Halle Bailey in the role of Ariel. And it's mainly because she makes this role her own, both in terms of, the familiar songs that she has to sing, and just putting on, like, the persona of Ariel as this mermaid who's fascinated by the surface world and wants to be part of that world. And she makes this role her own. Like, there's rarely a moment where I thought, like, like, Ariel was like this and I missed it. And I missed that part about her. I feel like, Halle actually makes this role her own. Like, she gives it kind of like her own dimension. She doesn't rework it as much. Like, for those who are worried, like, if they're gonna, like, rework a lot of The Little Mermaid, relax. They don't. They're keeping this one very safe. Like, this is probably, like, the primary reason why you are going to see this film in theaters and why you didn't see, Robert Zemeckis' Pinocchio in theaters. This is a much more grounded remake with, like, the elements that kind of that you came to the original Little Mermaid for, that kind of ushered in, like, the Disney Renaissance when it came about. So yeah, Bailey's performance here works really well, and one of the aspects I think that I love about what director Rob Marshall does with this is that he gives her an additional song, because, like, within, like, the structure of how, like, they made the animated Little Mermaid movie, her voice gets taken away by Ursula when she wants to become a human, and we don't get to hear her voice. And thankfully there's an additional song here, which doesn't add too much. It's mostly just, like, tracking Ariel's mental state when she comes up to the surface, and how she's, like, translating everything that's happening in this world and trying to relate it to her own, which is, it's kind of neat. Like, I like that they explore these aspects where she's kind of thinking more about the world besides just, oh, I'm used to forks that are used as combs. It's like, they do that bit, obviously, because, they want to tug at the nostalgic heartstrings here. But I like that they explored a little bit, but it feels like it's missing just a little bit more to it. The same goes for probably the one character who gets a lot more development here is Prince Eric, played by Jonah Howard King. And much like Ariel, they expand him enough where you get to have more scenes with him, but also he has his own musical number as well, which it's the same deal with Ariel. It's like it explores an interesting aspect of his character, but like two problems, like it's not as catchy as a song, and it's not expanding on much that like our imagination couldn't fill in. Now, placing the songs aside though, in terms of like the romantic chemistry between Bailey and Howard King, they have it. Like the many scenes that they have together, whether it's like they're partying at the village, or they're just having a quiet moment of like looking at maps and sharing their knowledge of undersea culture. Those scenes work really well. Like they definitely have some chemistry there, and I love the fact that Rob Marshall actually gave these scenes a little bit more time to develop and gave them some weight. Another great performance here is, and I kind of assume she would do fine, is Melissa McCarthy as the Sea Witch Ursula. Much like Ariel, McCarthy puts a little bit of her own spin on it. Not a lot, just enough of a little bit of a twist on it, on the familiar songs and the persona of the character that you never like think back like, oh, I remember Ursula did that it doesn't like that's like the biggest praise I can say for the film is that it became enough of its own thing where there were several scenes where I wasn't thinking of the original. I was just thinking, oh, this is just a kind of a neat musical fantasy that's kind of working on its own level. Now, and I'm sure everyone's like, okay, there's got to be some stuff that's not working here. And there are. It's outside of those three roles, the supporting cast doesn't really pick up as much as you'd like them to. You have Javier Bardem playing King Triton, which I think is a good choice. But I feel like he doesn't have like the same level of intimidation as the original animated film. Because like when King Triton got furious, like you felt, at least when I was a kid, when I watched the animated film, I felt terrified watching him just go, berserk on his daughter when she finds out that she's been obsessing with the human world. And here it's just kind of like, it's almost kind of like, and I mean, this is kind of like the type of character that Bardem plays, where it's kind of like that. He gives that I'm not angry, but I'm disappointed type of vibe. Which in a few scenes it works all right, and I love that it gives him kind of like a little bit more of a caring nature. It was just like there was an interesting dynamic between like the rage and the heartfeltness within the animated film, and here it feels like it's mostly heartfelt. Where even there's an additional scene here where it feels like, okay, this is a perfect opportunity for like Triton to just explode with anger about the way that like the human world treats the sea, and it's just kind of like, it's treated a little bit more stoic than it should be. And this is also reflected in, maybe it's just like, Triton rubbing off on Sebastian, but Tavid Diggs playing the role of Sebastian the Crab is also very, very, like, understated, where it's like, for most people who remember, like, the animated version of Sebastian, like, he was very much a worried, manic crab who who's just terrified that he was going to like lose his head over not keeping track of Ariel. And here he feels a little bit more passive because it has all the same, almost like verbatim, all the same lines that like Sebastian had in the animated original. And it's just like the worry isn't there in his voice. Like the anxiety and the fear isn't there. And I guess like, I almost kind of feel like either is this like a limitation of like the CGI here that they do to like make the semi photorealistic crab like believable, because like maybe it's like okay pull it back, like I know you're supposed to be like terrified and have anxiety for being around Triton and being around Ariel, but you need to dial it back because it's gonna look photorealistic a little bit. Like the weird thing is like with Sebastian, I think this goes for like most of the animals, like they run an okay line between photorealism and exaggeration. That's like, it's kind of odd. Like it's not wholly distracting where I'm like, oh my god, this is like a hideous creation. But but it feels like it's limited, and I can't help but feel like it probably limited to Diggs' performance here. I think it's almost like thankful that one thing that the film doesn't have from the animated film is you might remember there's a scene where Sebastian is kind of running through a kitchen in which the French chef is trying to kill him while he's killing all this other seafood, and it's just, in animated form, it's kind of funny, but it's also kind of like, dark, and it's like dark humor and bizarre, and you can't help but feel, if this was in live action, this would be a horror movie. That whole scene would be terrifying. So they thankfully don't include it, which is good, because there actually are a lot of intense scenes when Ursula kind of like assumes like full power with like Triton's staff, and watching like the shipwreck happen with like the thunderstorm and the fire. At least for me, I was watching this in like the Dolby Cinema, and while I was watching, like it felt like towering and like very powerful, where it's like, I almost kind of got to put this out there for like families who are going to bring their kids to this, because that like millennials are going to bring their kids to this so that they can experience Little Mermaid as well. Be aware that maybe don't do the Dolby Cinema with them, because it gets pretty loud and intense, especially during the scenes with ships. It gets pretty intense in those scenes, which I like, because it felt like more of the epic fantasy, and it kind of gave me a little bit of those nostalgic pangs for the original. Like it didn't make me think like, oh, this is better than the original, but it reminded me like, oh yeah, this was a similar sensation that I felt with the original film, and it was kind of neat to feel like, to at least know this film was trying to recapture that. Getting back to the animal characters though, you have like a few other voice actors cast here who pretty much just, they do what you expect. Like Jacob Tremblay plays Flounder, and like Flounder's a thankless role, so like Jacob does okay with the few lines he's given. They don't really expand on his character. Who they do give more lines to and expand a little bit is the northern gannet called Scuttle, this time voiced by Aquafina. And it's mostly just like a typical Aquafina performance. It's mostly just she does the same voice she always does, and she plays kind of like, a little bit of like, like a little bit of like an audience surrogate for how she would react to stuff, except she's supposed to be playing like the absent-minded Scuttle, so she's going to have like a little bit of like dopey comedy, which she does okay at. And I mean, like the character she's playing, again, the character that she's playing here is very limited with expression, so you're not going to get a lot out of it, which is weird, because there's a musical number between Scuttle and Sebastian, and it's a choice. It's definitely going to be like a dividing factor. It's definitely the most garish song, and it's definitely going to divide a lot of people. It could have definitely been cut from this film. Because like the thing is, like, this Little Mermaid, it does an okay job with what it wants to take liberties with, on what it wants to expand. At the same time, though, this film runs a little bit over 2 hours, and when you compare it to kind of like the 90 minutes roughly of the original animated Little Mermaid, this one feels like it's just kind of like, especially during the second act, it feels like it's just kind of like padding a little bit too much of it, like where scenes progress a little bit longer than they should. Like I dig the chemistry between like Bailey and Howard King, like those scenes are great, but they linger a little bit too long. It's like okay, this is a nice scene, but it's going on just a little bit too long. Just pick up the pace here. The same goes for like when Ursula enters the picture, when she assumes a new form. It's like, okay, we're getting there. This is all right. I'm kind of digging this. I like that McCarthy puts a little bit of her own spin on it with like her overreactions, and she leans into like the diva nature in it of that character. But like, again, like the biggest problem I would say with this film overall, in terms of like not dividing it into one section, is just it's a bit slower than it has to be. Like, it definitely has pacing problems around the second and third act where it could be tightened. And I mean, I don't want to single out for that one song, which probably should have been cut. But yeah, it could stand to this film could stand to lose a few pounds because honestly, like the visuals kind of work here. Like I like the scenes that involve like the ship with like the fire and the water effects that work really well. Any scene underwater, actually, like a lot of people have been complaining that the film is too dark. And I think it's mostly just because they're watching the scene where Ariel is supposed to be, like kind of like a little bit in like of like a spotlight to kind of be in the darkness about wanting to be part of that world, similar to the animated film as well. Like if you go back and watch the animated film in that sequence, it's a very dark scenario because like the rest of the undersea environment is like it's bright, it's beautiful, it's colorful, and I mean it would have to be like if you're gonna have the under the sea sequence where Sebastian sings about why Ariel should be under the sea. You want to make it colorful and fantastical and beautiful and give the audience a reason to believe Sebastian about that. And for as much photorealism as they try for this stuff, they make sure that they have a lot of color going on here. I love the fact that all the mermaids have different patterns and colors on them. Like there's no like they don't just like settle on one particular type of sea life. They actually expand it a lot more. A little bit of a controversial call with like the under the sea sequence. They don't showcase the animals as they are sung in the lyrics. Instead, they show different creatures. And for a lot of people who are probably going to complain about that, I think it was a good choice. Because honestly, like, I have no doubt that they could replicate all the aquatic life for this animated sequence. I've seen that before. I would like to see, different aquatic creatures used in the sequence. So they do. They use turtles well. They use like coral and like bigger creatures and tiny creatures so well, and they form different patterns and like these weird like designs around like Ariel. They get very creative with it, and that's more or less what you want out of like Little Mermaid film like this. Of course, a lot of people prefer that they don't remake the Little Mermaid, but it's the world we live in right now. But in terms of just being like a cover song for the Little Mermaid, this film does well, and I think it's due to a combination of both the performances, specifically of like the trifecta here of Halle Bailey, Jonah Hauer-King, and Melissa McCarthy. All three of them make this film worth watching. Any scene with them together is perfect, which makes sense because like you have the grand climax where all three of them are fighting amid the giant like tsunami or like whirlpool, whatever you want to call it. Pretty good sequence there. I like the danger and the effects there. And another thing I should mention to you, like the visuals are very clear during that scene. For a scene that's dark and has like thunderstorms, you can definitely tell what's going on here. But, at the end of the day, of course, this is not going to replace the original 1989 animated film, which should surprise nobody. It's also not the worst rendition of a Disney animated film making like the remake transition here. And the way that I've always kind of related to, as I've related to like the other Disney animated films is that these are cover songs. It's playing your greatest hits. Given, that it's like a live action performance, it's like, it's like going to see a play and have different actors involved. Like, when they take a show off Broadway. And on that level, The Little Mermaid mostly works. It's definitely in the decent camp. It's far more bearable. If you are going to end up seeing these Disney animated films, like, this is definitely one of the better ones. I would say, like, by far, like, right before like Jungle Book, which is when like the Disney remakes really started kicking in, I would place Little Mermaid right after that because honestly, like a great performance can save a film, and Halle Bailey, she pretty much carries this film. She's the reason to see it. You get a lot from her, and she's entertaining to watch, whether she's singing, whether she's in the mermaid form, or or if she's just having like the chemistry with Prince Eric. Those scenes work, and that's the big reason that you would watch this film, and it's the number one reason that the film works. Because without it, this film just kind of like, it's kind of nothing. It's kind of like just like, okay, this is an okay remake, but it's not adding much to it. Like, even with the additional scenes, not adding a whole lot. So the one reason that you should probably go see this film is just for the performances. So yeah, the new Little Mermaid is worth it just for the performances, but not much else. So The Little Mermaid will be in theaters this Friday. Or Thursday night if you're gonna go to Thursday previews. I believe it's actually it's probably gonna do really well. I remember let me double check. The last time I checked the box office projections is that it was somewhere at 110 million. Okay. I'm seeing somewhere between, like, I've seen some publications say it's probably going to be like 110 million, and I think, yeah, Variety here is saying it's going to be 120 million. So it's going to make bank. Like all Disney animated films. I mean, all Disney remakes based on specifically Disney Renaissance stuff. Which is, that really needs to be stressed, because that's the real reason that 2019's The Lion King did so well. A lot of people are like, you know what? Why did The Lion King make so much money? Why did it make so much? It's like, it's because, you know, it's playing up on millennial nostalgia for it. That's why that film made money. That's why Beauty and the Beast made money, and that's why The Little Mermaid is going to make money. Because I feel like within this platform, I should stress this, some people are going to be confused about, like, even when I've told you about, like, the box office predictions and everything that's tracking with it, you're going to get some people next week who are going to be confused. Specifically people who are entirely within, like, the YouTube bubble of film criticism and, you know, talking about movies. They are going to be like, how did this film make 120 million? I don't believe it. Because there are already people right now who are like, I don't believe that, you know, the Lion King made over $1 billion. And if you don't, they say, like, I don't know anyone. And it's like, that's because you live in a bubble. It's because, like, the majority of audiences who are going to these films, they don't watch these YouTube reactions where people get, like, all flustered about the visual effects and the remakes and the music. They don't look at it. They just see, you know, like, oh, it's like The Little Mermaid heading back to the theater. Better go watch it with my kids. That's the primary reason they go watch this stuff, you know? So yeah, be aware. That's all I'm saying, you know? All right, so what do we got next on the docket? Let's see. I'll talk about a more exciting film here. Get a little Fast X. So let's get up my notes here, and we'll talk about Fast X. All right. Oh, also, quick shout out. Like, I'm on like a subscription, like, you know, bonanza right now. So thank you, Scott C, for subscribing during the review. Which, by the way, if you're watching this and you'd like to interrupt me with more Mad Max stuff, I do have alerts for that. So if you want to like or subscribe, or do super chats or anything like that, I have set up specific weird little alerts for that. If you want to try them out, no pressure. Just if you want to, you know, be a part of it and interrupt my stream and throw me off and generally ruin the stream, which people love, go for it. All right. Which I feel like I'm going to regret saying that. Okay, let's get into talking about Fast X, because I do have a lot to say about Fast and the Furious. Here we go. All right, so 3, 2, 1. So Fast X is the 10th entry in the Fast and the Furious saga. And I feel like I almost got to mention, like, the Fast and the Furious franchise, because, like, every new film that comes out, they always got to put, like, a new title in it, like the Fate of the Furious, or, you know, or they just literally just call it F9, like, not even like Fast 9 or Fast and Furious 9 or FF9. I believe it's just called just F9. And so now we got like Fast 10. So it's like, oh, hope you kids know your Roman numerals. Now, this film has been like a little bit divisive with people. Obviously, like if you're tired of the Fast and Furious films, you don't really dig the car chases. You've never been about like the bombastic nature of this saga. You're probably not gonna like this film, like all the Fast and Furious films. That being said, if you have been following the saga, and I say this as someone who didn't really care for Fate of the Furious and F9, like I don't feel they're bad films. I just kind of feel like after Fast 5, Fast and Furious 6, and Furious 7, I felt like 8 and 9 just kind of like plateaued. It's just kind of like, okay, it's par for the course. Because like F8, you had like zombie cars, and you had the submarine that they had to like disable. And then with F9, you have what everyone was expecting. You had streetcars go up into space. So at that point, it's like, what more can you do with it? And thankfully, having like not liked those films, Fast X actually renewed my faith. Like I honestly think this is probably like one of my favorites of all, like the like past like I have like a little bit of like a soft spot for like the first film, and the fourth Fast and Furious film I kind of like, but this is probably up there as one of my favorite ones. Fast X is definitely probably... I had a lot more fun. I will say this. I had a lot more fun with Fast X than I ever did with F8 and F9. And the main reason, like there's a lot of contributing factors that make me love this entry, but the number one reason is Jason Momoa. Jason Momoa plays the villain of this picture. He plays Dante, who is a character who does have a relation to a past villain, specifically the villain from Fast 5. So they have a little bit of like what I mean a little bit. They have a callback to Fast 5, like, oh, remember these events? Well, guess who else was there? Jason Momoa. And he wants revenge. So at that point I thought, okay, it's just going to be, he wants revenge, so he's scowling. He's going to be like the other villains, like, like Jason Statham and Charlize Theron. They're just kind of going to be a little bit of like tongue-in-cheek, but like very like, typical sinister terrorist. But no, Jason Momoa, instead of just going down that similar route, he switches things up entirely by playing basically a comic book villain. You're gonna hear a lot of people talk about it. Like, Jason Momoa is pretty much playing like the villain you would expect in a superhero movie, just because he is playing up this character as like a terrorist who knows that he's in a Fast and the Furious film. So he's giddy about everything. He's excited to get revenge on Dom. Like his vicious plans, which target his family members, he gets all excited about. He has an eccentric style. Like he puts his hair up in buns, and he paints his nails. He wears ridiculous outfits. He acts very flamboyant around everyone, and is just having too much fun chewing up the scenery, like more than any other character. To the point where it's almost like garish, but I kind of like that, because it makes you realize, like, oh, this is not like the typical villains who are usually in the Fast and Furious films. This guy feels like a genuine psychopath. And like the perfect example of this is like there's a scene where he kills two of his henchmen and then hacks a computer. Now this scene could have just gone straight with him just like, killing them, doing the hacking, barely saying a word, scene's over. Instead, he kills these two guys off screen. He props up their bodies with like tape, paints their nails, and has one-sided conversations with them while he enacts the next part of his evil scheme. And it's just that's that sort of like delightful psychopath type of villain that you kind of hope that more action films would have. And I feel like the Fast and the Furious films are just ridiculous enough that it can make this type of character work, where he is ridiculous, he is over the top, but he's also a major threat, and you can buy him as a threat in this type of scenario. So yeah, so Jason Momoa is the big draw, but thankfully there's a lot of other characters here. Most of them work, even though most of them are kind of doing what we expect from them. Like you have Vin Diesel back as Dominic Toretto, and of course the hallmark of the Fast and Furious saga is all about family. Family is the most important thing, so he starts off the film with with his son. His son is getting closer to driving age. Like he's not ready for a learner's permit yet, but that doesn't stop Dom. He realizes he lives a dangerous life. So kids got to drive a car. So and also it's like it's Dom. He's not gonna wait for his kid to be able to get a permit. He's gonna get that kid driving right away. So Dom cares about his kid. He cares about the rest of his crew there. Like Letty, played by Michelle Rodriguez. They have their obligatory, lovey-dovey moment. But then once the action picks up, and there's a threat to the world, we have all the characters split here. And I feel like they're divided up enough where you can have fun with them. And some of that, is due to the fact that this film runs about like 2.5 hours long. But it uses that time well with all the characters assembled. Because with every Fast and the Furious film, they always expand the ensemble cast here. It always grows, even when like they kill off characters, like the past few films have killed off characters, and they do kill off characters in this century as well. It always feels like it keeps expanding. It gets bigger and bigger, and they have to try to find stuff to do with all the characters. And thankfully they do. It feels like there is enough going on where no character gets shoved to the wayside. In particular, with Letty, it would seem like a lot of these films like struggle to find stuff to do with Rodriguez, but Letty actually has one of the best fight scenes in this. Like at one point, she's captured by the agency, who you might remember. The agency, they kind of worked with Dom and his street racing crew to save the world when they were run by Mr. Nobody, but since Mr. Nobody's out of the picture, the agency's got a little corrupt. So Letty gets kidnapped, and she has to work alongside Cypher, played by Charlize Theron. And like they eventually work together, but they also have a kick-ass fight sequence between the two of them that involves them just slamming each other, punching each other across the face, and at one point using lasers. And it's easily one of the best fight scenes in the film. Another group that you follow, you have Roman, played by Tyrese Gibson, and Tej, played by Ludacris, who are just like the perfect comedic duo. Like Roman is kind of like a doofus who wants to assume leadership, but always makes mistakes, and Tej is like an expert hacker who always like kind of insults Roman, and Roman kind of like fumbles his plans every now and again. They're a great comedic duo, and they use them well here, especially with the fact that you have Roman wanting to prove himself more. So you kind of feel bad for the guy. You root for him, and you hope that he'll get to prove himself. And then acting as like a little bit of like an off to the side mediator, you have Natalie Emanuel as the hacker Ramsey. Here she is, just getting a few quips, and it would seem like she'd be there to like balance them, but she mostly just kind of like hangs back with with Han, played by she hangs back with Han, played by Sung Kang, and they're just kind of like, should we interfere? No, let's just hang back, because because Ramsey mostly is just like, I don't want to get between these guys because they're crazy, and Han just snacks, just hangs back, like, and I love the fact that like the film is like aware of these trademarks and leans into them, because at one point Han just eats psychedelic muffins and has like there's a little bit of fun had with it, not as much as you'd think, but I kind of get the fact that like I kind of feel like Han is probably used to edibles by now. With how many times he snacks in these films, he's probably got to be used to it. So then, like, they have great chemistry, and they're off to the side. Dom is trying to track down Dante, while at the same time trying to protect his other family members from past films and get more information. And then you have, like, even more additional characters thrown into the mix. Like, you have Brie Larson playing Tess, a member of the agency who doesn't quite agree with them. She's a bit of a turncoat. And she gets a little bit of her own character for how little time she has on screen. Like, I love the fact that they establish her as this person who wears these ridiculous, like, she's got like this very like formal attire of like, like a very like dapper dressed agent, and then you look down at her shoes and she's got like spikes on them, which is like a great little like callback. She's like, look, I'm gonna be professional at work, but I might need to kill someone later, so I'm gonna wear these spikes on my shoes. And I love the fact that like the one time that she actually uses them like a lot is with like scraping up someone's car, specifically Jason Momoa's car, which leads to some great reactions. And then you have a few other characters who return here. Like I already mentioned, like Cypher returns, but you also have Jason Statham returning as Shaw. He has a pretty good fight scene with Han as well. So you have rivals coming together because they have a common enemy with Dante. So you have a great reason to throw them together. And then a few other characters you expect to pop in for a little bit of a cameo. Helen Mirren pops up because, she becomes another target, some first shot to save. Rita Morano just shows up to say, yeah, family's big. I'm not really going to do much, but family is important. And nothing says family more than Rita Morano. So, but yeah, like the film that has like enough going on to make them work. Of course, I'm mostly talking about the characters here. And the number one reason that everyone's going to be coming to this film is for the action scenes. And the action scenes are like, you can't help but wonder, like, they've already sent like a car up into space. So where do you go from here? Well, you just try to make like the best damn car chases and the biggest ridiculous action scenes you can. The first set piece in particular is a lot of fun. It's basically the crew is trying to stop a giant bomb from blowing up the Vatican. But the bomb is a giant sphere that's on fire, that's rolling around Rome. So you have Dom and his crew basically smacking around this giant ball, which I'll be honest, this looks like a pinball game. If they make you pretty much could do this. You can make a Fast and the Furious pinball game framed entirely around the sequence. Just shape the whole board like Rome and make the ball kind of like shaped like the bomb in this film, and just have like the bumpers be cars. Because that's really what this is. It's a ridiculous sequence, which, at this point you expect with the Fast and Furious films, where it's cars like smacking a rolling bomb around Rome, which is very much on brand for Fast and the Furious. Complete with all like the ridiculous things that you would expect. Like at one point, like Dom smacks his car into like a construction crane, and the crane is just perfectly positioned where it would smack into the bomb here. So yeah, there's a lot of like expected hallmarks that you have within a Fast and Furious film, as well as like some interesting touches that I've kind of noticed like from other action films. Like at one point, there's a scene where Dom has to save someone's car from exploding because of a bomb that's been placed underneath the car. Now, if anyone's seen the Transporter films, speaking of like other cars, in the Transporter films, there is a scene exactly like this where a bomb is under the car and they have to find a way to get it off. And the way that it's removed is pretty much in Fast X. It's removed exactly the same way that it is in the Transporter movies. Which I kind of appreciate, because like it's ridiculous, but it's like, it's kind of like it's classic ridiculous. It's like it's that weird over the top type of action that is so uproarious and bizarre. But at this point, for like the 10th Fast and Furious film, you kind of expect it, and you're kind of like rooting for it. In fact, at one point there's like a midair rescue scene, which at this point has kind of become expected in the films, where like someone has to fly out of a car and they jump into another car and someone saves them, or they smash into a windshield. And that happens here. And I saw this film with just like the perfect audience for this, because they knew this scene was coming. They knew what was going to happen. They knew how it was going to end. And the way that it was framed, with just like giant explosions and like trucks smashing into each other, and just being absurd with the way it's shot with the green screen, everyone was cheering in the audience. It's like, yes, this is absurd. It's ridiculous. It's over the top, and it's explosive. And this is kind of what you want out of a Fast and Furious film at this point. Because like, look, like some of the people who are probably not going to like this film are going to be the people who be like, remember when the Fast and the Furious films were all about just street racing, and it wasn't about bombs or submarines or the world ending or blowing up the Vatican or, blowing up dams and missiles flying through the air? Remember when it was just street racing? And it's like, those days are long gone. That like those days have been gone since Fast 5. That was 5 films ago you were rooting for. in terms of like leaning into this aspect of what audiences have come to expect from Fast and Furious films, this one actually works. Because it uses a lot of the characters well. It has a lot of great action sequences that are firmly with tongue in cheek. You have Jason Momoa eating up the scenery, and oh, how can I forget? Like you have John Cena returning as Jacob, who you might remember Dom's long lost brother, and they actually do a lot of fun stuff with him. You have Jacob looking after Dom's son, and he's basically trying to be the best uncle that he can be, while also piloting experimental craft and driving a car that shoots artillery shells. And those scenes are actually pretty sweet. I gotta admit that those scenes are actually a lot of fun. And I guess like that's the best way to describe this film. It's just like it knows how to have fun with as much as it throws into this film. Even for like having more additional characters. Like one of the standout characters who's interesting because like you're not sure if you can trust this guy or not is Alan Ritchson playing Ames, who's like the new leader of the agency, and this guy is up to no good. Just because of like the look of him and his demeanor, where it's like I don't trust Dom, I don't trust anyone, and like the agency has been too lenient on these guys. I'm gonna bring him in, so it's like you're not quite sure whether or not to trust this guy, and it's interesting how the film kind of like fluctuates with that character a little bit. Like you can kind of see the signs coming the more that the film goes along, but yeah, he's a fun kind of on again off again rival for Dom in this scenario. Now the film has been directed by Louis Latour, who he also did like the Now You See Me movies. And he definitely puts his little hallmark touches on this. You might remember like how in the Now You See Me movies, there are those scenes where it's like they get an extreme close up and like the camera contorts to kind of like go down pipes and go up people's sleeves and all that. There's a great sequence at the climax here where it's just like you look at it and you're like, this is definitely the director's choice here. Because like Lewis was replacing Justin Lin here, which I love Justin Lin's direction, but I honestly feel like Luis's direction kind of saves this, because I don't know how much of this was like his decision. Like, look, we have Jason Momoa, he's got to camp this stuff up like hardcore. Like, I imagine like probably like Justin Lin's original screenplay probably did have Jason Momoa playing it more straight, like as the serious brooding bad guy who would like sometimes make a quip here and there. I don't know for certain if that was the plan, but Momoa definitely makes it his own. But yeah, like when you get to that climax and there's a great scene where Dom engages the nitro and you see the camera go around the car and like up Dom's sleeve, you can see the veins. It goes down to his wrist. It goes on the key. It goes inside the car. It goes into the engine and into the nitro, and then the nitro goes out. It's just, it goes on for so long, but it's like for the absurdity that happens within a Fast and the Furious film, it's on point. It's perfectly suited for this type of film. And the other reason that I love this film, and this is the reason that a lot of people are referring to this as kind of like the Infinity War or the Empire Strikes Back of the Fast and Furious films, is it's because it ends on a cliffhanger. And it's not like, and it's not one of those like, oh, what do we do now type of cliffhangers where it's just like the characters are reunited and they got to get back at that villain. It ends on kind of like like the Batman live action show would end on like a cliffhanger. It's like, what will Batman do in this scenario? Like they cut right before like the blade's about to like saw them in half and something like that. That's very much the case with Fast X. It ends at a point like almost like mid-action where you're just like, wait, what's gonna happen? So like it's beautiful for how like this film kind of has the audience by the balls, where they're gonna have to come back and see because how could you not? Like it ends at like an uncertain moment where you're not sure what exactly happened to Dom and his crew. Like it cuts off at just the right point to make you concerned about what's gonna happen next, which is beautiful. And also like people have already mentioned this too, that there's a mid-credit sequence in which there's even more cameos. So I'll say this: like there's cameos by characters from other Fast and the Furious films who you might not be expecting to come back. But then again, maybe you are, because like we saw Han come back from the dead for just the most bizarre reasons. So there's a lot of characters who come back from the dead. In fact, I won't spoil it, but if you've watched the Fast and Furious films, you can probably guess who's coming back for like the next Fast and Furious film. So in terms of like making it like more of like an all-encompassing Fast and Furious film, which taps into more of like its own lore and trying to weave all these different characters in here while throwing even more of them into the mix. Like even Scott Eastwood comes back here, and you have like Pete Davidson shows up at one point for a tiny role here. For making all these elements gel together, I was surprised how much it worked and how fun it was. So yeah, like the way that I've been describing it is that this is like the Empire Strikes Back of the Fast and the Furious films, and that's honestly why this is probably my favorite film. Just because of the absurdity and the tension, the cliffhangers, the great car chases that are wonderfully absurd. But of course, if you need one reason to go see this film, more than any, like if you've never been big on the Fast and Furious films, the number one reason you need to see this film is for Jason Momoa. Just because he's the perfect villain. He is by far the best villain that we've ever had in the Fast and Furious film. And it's mostly just because he's having as much fun as you would expect the audience to be having with it. So yeah, Fast X is the greatest entry for Jason Momoa alone. And probably just all things considered, it's my favorite Fast and the Furious film. What can I tell you? So Fast X currently playing in theaters right now. Woo. Let's read a little bit of the chat here while I switch out the notes here. So Andy Bortman writes, "Have you seen Triangle of Sadness?" I have. The Ruben Osterman film. I believe it's his first English film. I have issues with it. It's not my favorite from Ruben, definitely, but it's one of those films where it's like in bits and pieces. I like a collection of scenes in it that work really well. It's definitely one of those, like, Triangle of Sadness is one of those, like, those blatant class divide films where it makes it very clear what it's trying to say. Especially because, like, at one point, like, the one moment that I think is the most funny is the moment that's also the most on the nose, and it kind of, like, drops a lot of the subtlety, is where Woody Harrelson, who plays, like, the captain, who establishes himself as a who believes that he's more of like of a communist, is having a debate with a rich capitalist, and they're kind of like smirking at each other. They're both drunk while they're making these arguments, and they continue their arguments over the PA system, and they're very direct about their ideology. And it's like it's ridiculous, but at the same time, it's like, this is pretty. A lot of the dialogue here, it's actually pretty funny, and it has its wit here and there. Like I like the fact that Woody Harrelson's character says, like, he gets accused of being a Marxist. He's like, "Excuse me, I'm not a Marxist. I'm a communist." And it's like, that's a wonderful line. So yeah, like I feel like it loses a bit of steam in the third act. Like, there are aspects of the third act I really like. I feel like the first act kind of just spins its wheels a bit with trying to establish the like the stuffy nature. Like, it goes out of its way to make sure that you're not supposed to root for these characters. And I don't really feel like it grounds itself into, like, the second act. And even, like, by the third act, it does ground itself, but it kind of just spins its gears a little bit with trying to find something more to say, and ultimately just kind of peters out by the end. So it's not a bad film. I actually really enjoyed parts of it. So yeah, Triangle of Sadness is all right. Also, I kind of skirted around it, but yeah, there's a scene where they all throw up on the ship, and there's a lot of puke. So, be forewarned. Regular viewer here, Sucked, said, I feel like it's been a long time since we've had a surprise cliffhanger in a mainstream franchise. Almost like this is the Empire Strikes Back of the Fast and Furious movies. Yep. Exactly. Like, yeah, I've kind of missed that, because it feels like films like almost kind of err on the side of caution that they might not come back. So like they leave a cliffhanger out there, but they also kind of like set up like a decent end point. And I like the fact that Fast X doesn't give you like that satisfaction of ending on that note, you know. It doesn't end on like on a happy note, I guess is the best way to say it, you know. All right, we'll see how well my voice holds that. I probably won't do White Man Can't Jump, just 'cause I don't know how much my voice is gonna hold out here. I will do the other two films I said I would do here, because You Hurt My Feelings is coming out in theaters this weekend, so I gotta cover that. I actually saw this film 2 weeks ago. So I just gotta recall everything that happened. Okay, let's get the notes up here. Okay. Alrighty. Okay, and here we go in 3, 2, 1. So, You Hurt My Feelings is a comedy, light comedy with a little bit of drama added in, about a married couple who face a tough time with being honest with each other. And it's not like it's not a huge deal where it feels like this is a situation that's going to ruin this marriage, where it feels like they're going to be on like the brink of divorce by the end of the picture. It's nothing that serious. It feels like it almost feels like this is a more relatable situation for like a married couple who is not on the rocks, but like has some issues here and there with their relationship. And it's mostly because this film treats its married couple as two people who genuinely love each other. It's still there. They still have passion. But they have problems with just being more open and being honest with themselves. Not like huge problems where it's just like they have like this festering this rage and pain within them that they got to deal with, but just kind of like they need to be nudged a little bit into like being better people. So the married couple is Beth and Don, played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Tobias Menzies, and they both have problems with honesty within their careers as well, because like they've kind of fallen into this point in their life where they still love each other, but their careers have kind of stagnated and they've kind of lost a little bit of their passion. So Beth is an author who is kind of struggling to sell her latest manuscript because she's dabbling into a new area and she's been working on it for 2 years and can't convince any publisher to go with her. And at the same time, she's struggling for relevancy because she's seeing other authors more successful than her that are rising up through the ranks. Don is a therapist who is kind of losing his way. He's struggling to try to give advice and is not doing a very good job. He's unsure how to help people, and he's kind of holding back his feelings about situations that could really use some blunt honesty. Like the film opens with him trying to help a married couple played by Amber Tamblyn and David Cross, who are just like a comically over the top like dysfunctional marriage that is not working. There's never a moment where you think that Beth and Don are going to get a divorce, but you just know that like that Jonathan and Carolyn are probably going to get a divorce at some point. They're just absurd, and they're probably like the funniest part of the film. So Beth and Don are kind of like struggling with their feelings. They celebrate an anniversary where they kind of like grin and bear the same gifts that they've got for every anniversary. Like Beth gets some earrings with a design that she's had many, many times. Dawn gets a V-neck t-shirt. I believe it's like I don't know if it's a t-shirt, but it's a V-neck, and he's kind of like, okay, it's V-neck. I don't like wearing them, but I'll go with it because it's our anniversary. I'm being nice here. So this film is all about just people struggling to be nice and trying to find a way to be more open, because the inciting incident here is that Beth tries to surprise Don one day by sneaking up on him in the store because she finds him out and about one day, and then she overhears Don talking to his friend Mark, played by Aria Moyad, I believe is pronouncing it correctly. Don basically says that he didn't really like Beth's manuscript. Like, he said, yes, I'm here for you. I'm going to support you, but it's like, yeah, you'll sell this thing. But in private, Don says I don't really like her manuscript. I don't know if it's going to do that well. And so Beth, overhearing this, is immediately crestfallen. She believes that she was under the belief that Don was brutally open with her this entire time, and it feels like she's been lied to. And of course, this feels like a situation that it could be resolved with just one good sit down and talk this out. And indeed, that's eventually where all this is leading to. It's just these two characters just need to sit down, be a little bit open, and they'll be fine. This is just a minor hurdle that one discussion could solve. But the discussion gets put off because Beth doesn't really want to confess here, because she has the same problem as Don. Don doesn't want to hurt Beth's feelings, and Beth doesn't want to feel like she's snooping and needs to know everything about Don at every time. And the thing is, because Don actually does care for her. It's not one of those things where he's just outright lying to her. It's a thing that Don cares for Beth to a degree that, he wants to, support her and make her feel good. Because at one point, early on, Beth kind of confronts Don and says, do you like my manuscript? And Don's kind of well, do you like your manuscript? Because that's actually kind of the more important thing here. If you're going to do writing, you want to make sure it's something that you want to write, and it's something that you want to have passion for. Because even if you don't become successful and you don't make a living at it, you still want to do it because you like it. And that's ultimately what the film is leading up towards, is that you've got to be honest, and you've got to find some love in what you do. Because eventually, Don does bounce back when he's more open. Beth does bounce back when she starts working better with publishers. And my biggest problem with this film is just that, because the issue isn't that dire and the stakes are very, very low for this type of comedy, the characters are treated so precious, where it's they're so delicate, where you feel the slightest big conflict could like set them off. And indeed, like, you kind of see that happen with Beth and Don's son, Elliot, played by Owen Teague, who kind of like is like the kind of like the audience surrogate here. He gives like the blunt information to his parents, like, like, look, guys, you've been supportive, but being supportive isn't like the same as, giving love. Like, there's such a thing as, toxic positivity that you're kind of like giving off here, and you kind of got to knock it off. It's like Elliot's probably the most relatable character here because he's much more blunt, but at the same time doesn't really want to hurt anyone's feelings. He just wants to live his own life, and he just wants, characters to be more honest and open with themselves, which is the perfect balance for Beth and Don. Like, he's, it would feel like he'd be a third wheel in this, but he's definitely not. He's definitely like the grounding element of this married couple. In addition to that, the other characters that get to talk to, like, they also have their own problems. Like, Sarah, who is Beth's sister, played by Michaela, I believe I'm saying that right, Michaela Watkins, who, she's a interior designer who is bitter about her job as well. She's married to Mark, who is Don's friend as well. He's an actor who's struggling as well, and he hates his job and feels like, there's There's no out for him. And the thing is, like Mark and Sarah are in like a very interesting spot because they're at a point where they almost feel like they want to give up their jobs. Like they've lost their spark and they don't feel like it can work anymore. And it kind of becomes like an interesting parallel for how almost like Don and Beth feel like they can't make their relationship work anymore. So it's like Don and Beth are working on their relationship with their career on the side, and Sarah and Mark are working on their careers at the same time. And they both kind of have a little bit of overlap as the characters connect with each other. And there's some decent dialogue in there, but like my biggest problem with the film, and the reason that it didn't work for me, because I know this film worked for a lot of people. When this film hit festivals, there were a lot of people like, oh, it's a charming, very, very adorable film, I guess is the best way to say it. But the thing is, like, I found it just like a little bit too saccharine with like the way that it's framing its characters, because it feels like there's a lot of like setups for punchlines with making these characters like a little bit more satirical with material. Like, because like one of the jokes with Beth is that she writes her memoirs, and part of like her legacy is that she stages herself as like an abuse victim, but from verbal abuse. And from verbal abuse, I mean specifically just being told that she's stupid, which I feel like the film like wanted to make it like a punchline to be like, look how, because like at one point Beth does bring out like, I wish I had more abuse in my life so that my story was more interesting. And it feels like, that's satirical of like, people who were, people who want attention and feel like, they need more tragedy in their life because like tragedy will be more artistically fulfilling. But they don't really pay it off very much. And this feels like it happens again because at one point, like Beth tries to put like her problems in perspective by saying, this is not that big of a deal. Cause like climate change is happening and like the world's kind of ending. So, what are my problems? But it's kind of brought up more like just kind of like a passive punchline where it's just like, our marriage is in shambles, but like, oh, well, okay, there's climate change. I got to realize there's other problems in the world. There's other problems besides me. And there's a little bit of like a frustrating element to this where it almost feels like it's a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode where like someone who doesn't like cringe humor went in and kind of like wrote out all like the funny parts where like the characters get their comeuppance and, ridiculous things happen to them and like they get embarrassed and, karma comes back to bite them in the ass. And that doesn't happen in You Hurt My Feelings, just because like I feel like it's trying so hard to make you care about these characters and find them precious, to the point where at one point like Elliot runs a hemp shop, and at one point it's robbed while Beth is there, and of course when that happens, Beth just kind of like tries to protect her son by just like smothering him. She just gets on top of him, just like corners him, and like the robber's like, get the money. It's like, Mom, I gotta get the money or the robber's gonna shoot us. Can you get off me for a little bit? And it's like there's a little bit of dark humor in there. There's several moments in here where I kind of like smirked like that. Like I said, you have David Cross here and Amber Tamblyn playing off each other. They do a great job. You have a few other characters who kind of like make their mark here. Zach Cherry, who you might know, he has like kind of like a small role in like a few other like superhero films. He plays like kind of like this great therapist patient who you can tell like he hates his therapist and doesn't let that like right before he cuts off a call, he's like, God damn, this guy's an ass. I can't stand this. And like you can tell he's holding back like this frustration with the therapist. So there's like some decent dry humor here and there, but I don't know, maybe it's because like I viewed the film more on like kind of like a Curb Your Enthusiasm, where it's just like I was waiting for like a little bit more of the satire to kick in, and it doesn't really. Even when you have like the additional element of Jeannie Berlin playing Beth's mother, who has some quirky scenes. I kind of liked her scenes. It feels like a lot of these scenes are just kind of like playing off like, the improv and just hoping that some comedy will come through while trying to make very relatable scenes. Because that's that's the best praise of the film I can give, is that it's got a lot of scenes that feel real and relatable, and the characters feel very, it feels like people like this. So in terms of like setting up that atmosphere, I feel like it works. But in terms of being a comedy, it's very, very dry. And I feel like the dryness just makes it, a lot more crusty, with the fact that the characters are treated as so fragile and precious that it doesn't want to knock them over that much. And just like it feels like, okay, here's a scene where there might be a little bit of a fight. Okay, prop them back up. Okay, here's a scene where a character might overreact and they might say something funny. No, hang on, pull them back. Don't remind them of climate change, or remind them of like their, place their ego in check. Because like these are, it's frustrating, because this is like the film for like that person who like they can't stand cringe comedy, and they hope that like the characters won't make mistakes, and just like, oh, why would they do that? They shouldn't have done that. And here's a film where they don't do that. Like they're set up with scenarios where they could stumble and ridiculous things could happen, and they could, squabble and have some funny banter, and then they're pulled back from the brink. So I guess, like, and I can understand why some people like this film, because like the characters are likable enough. But in terms of I feel like it works better as a drama than it does a comedy. And because like it feels like a lot of times they're trying for comedy, it mostly kind of falls flat by trying to maintain your love for all the characters on screen. And for some people that's gonna work, but for me it kind of annoyed me a bit, where the most I got out of this film was just like a few smirks, a little tiny chuckle here and there, and just a decent level of relatability to these characters. So that was You Hurt My Feelings. It's playing in theaters. I believe it was in limited release last week, and it should be in wide release this week. Let's read the chat here. Sucks. Does You Hurt My Feelings have the classic Nicole Holoc? I always mispronounce her name. Nicole Holofnefer protagonist realization of their behavior that elevates the film by the end? Not really, and I think it's mostly just because like the characters are like aware of themselves almost at all times. Like it never feels like the characters have like a big epiphany. It feels like they just need to remind themselves, because they know that their problems are petty, and and that they're narcissists, and like they even already say this a few times. Like at one point, like Beth just says like, yeah, this is all just, to facilitate the fact that I'm a narcissist and I need my ego stroked and all that. But there's climate change in the world, so and I have a decent life here in New York, so I can't complain too much. So these are characters who are so balanced and well adjusted that it's frustrating. It's frustrating how balanced and decent and like near perfect these characters are. Like one aspect I didn't even go into in the review is like Don's whole deal is that I feel like he's getting too old and decides to get plastic surgery. And it doesn't look good, but Beth lies to him because like, you pick your battles. And it's like that's probably like the best moment of realization here, because after like the quote unquote fight they have where they come to terms with their feelings, they kind of just like make up, and they have like in jokes now at their anniversary. But Beth, she realizes what it's like to be nice and not be that brutal when addressing her husband's physical appearance, which is like, it's a nice moment, but it's like the first of like 3 more scenes that have to like come before the film ends. So yeah, like the film goes all over the place with trying to make these characters relatable and give them like small hills to conquer. I'd probably say that's like the best positive praise of the film, is that it's low stakes comedy and drama of a marriage. It's a marriage that just needs a little tap here and there to like to fix it up a little bit. So yeah, it's not like it's not Marriage Story, if that's what you're thinking, but yeah, it was a film that was too saccharine and adorable for me. And I say that because I feel like for a lot of people it's actually going to be more, they're actually going to love it a lot more because of that. So I put that as like a caveat. I don't hate this film. I actually had a few laughs here and there. It just didn't do it for me for what it was trying to set up here. But for a lot of audiences, especially like, the older crowd who's going to go see this, because I'm wondering if I should mention this or not, but the at the screening that we did for this, it was an AARP screening, which is basically they have it's called like movies for grown-ups. That's like which is like, it's a little bit insulting because I'm sorry, do you have to be over 50 to be a grown-up? You got to leave us like, upper 30s millennials in the dust here? Yeah. Is that your game, AARP? But yeah, I always kind of adore those screenings because I always get sat next to some old lady who asks me like, oh, what do you do? It's like, well, I write film reviews. It's like, oh, what are you gonna write about this film? It's like, well, it hasn't started yet. I'll write it when I'm done. It's always cute because they're always very talkative, and I love that about them. Okay, so I think I got one more review left in me. We'll cover a horror film here. What is that? Oh my god, I forgot about this entirely. Okay, so I have a little bit of show and tell here for you all. So when we got to like the Little Mermaid, the thing with like some movie screenings is that they will sometimes give you like little gifts and stuff like that. Like when I went to Scream 6, they gave me this Scream 6 mug here that's kind of shaped like the because Scream 6 is supposed to take place in New York, so I think this is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is like the like standard New York coffee cup design, I believe, because like you can kind of see like the ridges on the top there, But anyway, so yeah, we occasionally get stuff like that. We don't get as much stuff from Disney this time. However, we did get something. But even when like the press rep handed it to me, they were kind of baffled too. It's like I don't know why Disney wanted to hand these out, but they handed out these vials of sand, and I believe there's like let's see if I can get it in here. I believe, yeah, there's like a little seashell in there, if you can see that. See if it'll focus there. There it is. And it's weird, like it's just sand and a seashell, and like I don't know if I can get it out here, but there's like, there we go. I don't want to dump this out because it's just gonna spill sand everywhere. But like, there's paper in here that just says the Little Mermaid review embargo. So I don't know why they do this, because like, I mean, we get like review cards at the press screening that say the embargo on them, so we already know about it. So okay, this is like, I almost kind of want to preserve this just because like I've never gotten anything this weird from like from press kits and stuff like that. I mean, eventually like I'll like get all the sand out of here. Maybe I can do something with the vials. So, but that was weird. I'll throw it in the ocean and like somebody will find it on an island. I was like, oh, it's the Little Mermaid screening embargo. Bah! Throw it back out. It was so baffling. And when I went to the theater, like another critic showed it to me. He's like, did you get the thing with the, like, yeah, I don't know. Like, were you able to get the paper? It's like, no. And I know that like if I do, like the sand's gonna get everywhere. It's like, I don't know. Just I don't know. Uh it's an elaborate gift from the Little Mermaid, like a souvenir. And I mean, like they always give us out souvenirs, but like the souvenirs are usually like at Pearl, they gave out like an appropriate like scarf because it was like supposed to be a film set during like the early 20th century. And like I said, with like Scream, they gave you the New York Cup, and sometimes they'll give you like a T-shirt and a. I probably have some of that stuff lying around here, like a T-shirt and tote bag and stuff like that. But or like posters that I've got back there that I've got from screenings. But yeah, that goes down as like the weirdest thing I've ever gotten from the press kits. And that includes I've got another one. Like I think I have it hidden up there, but there's a what is it? There's a license plate for Nomadland that they gave us. Like I've got some pretty good press kit gifts, but that's the weirdest one. That's a new one on me. All right, let's close this out by talking about a cool ass horror movie. Yeah. All right. Get up my notes here so I can tell you about each entry. All right. My goodness. Okay. I wish they gave me souvenirs for VHS. That'd be fun. All right. So here we go. In 3, 2, 1. So VHS 99 is the latest entry in the VHS horror anthology franchise. Now, I've kind of gone back and forth on the VHS franchise. The first film I found very underwhelming. A lot of the horror shorts just didn't work for me. It felt like they were good ideas, but they didn't have like the best execution. But then you got to VHS 2, and that's still like top tier, like one of my favorite horror films ever made, just because of the astounding talent and the directors assembled, just fantastic talent. Like I brought this up in one of the other reviews, but the Kids versus Aliens is an expansion of one of the shorts from that anthology. So going back and forth, especially since, like the film after that one, VHS Viral, did nothing for me. So like great directors assembled, but the shorts did nothing for me. But that being said, I'm always up for horror anthologies, and especially one that wants to use like the VHS format as a framing for. Yeah, let's throw them up. Let's see what they can do. And actually, this entry is probably up there with VHS 2. Just because I love the concept, I love the framework here. The directors do an amazing job, and the shorts just run like a whole gamut of different tones and creativity with what you can do with the material and the era. So much like I believe like the next entry in VHS is also going to have this format. All the entries here are based on the year 1999. So VHS tapes from the very late 90s. And there's a lot of interesting stuff they find to do with this material. The first short, called Shredding, is it's kind of like a great use of kind of like, like when bands would like film themselves and doing like crazy stunts and stuff like that and pulling pranks, with like embracing like kind of like the Jackass era when everyone was obsessing with like, riding around in shopping carts and filming themselves, playing instruments. So yeah, I kind of dug like the vibe of Shredding. But the whole deal with Shredding is that it's a band that wants to film themselves playing where there was an urban legend about a band that was murdered by a supernatural force. So they go there and they kind of reenact like the situation, kind of like a Bloody Mary type thing. And then the creepy stuff from beyond starts happening when they do the Bloody Mary stuff, because that's what happens in VHS film. And I love the creative use here of like taping over stuff. Like I love like how they transition between what happened to the previous band and what the current band is trying to do. And then of course you have like the creepy VHS effects here, where like characters will like they'll stutter, they'll have like the static going, and you're just not quite sure where characters are in the scene, and you have like that creepy effect where it's like almost like the tape is alive, where it's like, certain characters are affected by what is being filmed in that moment, which has always kind of been a little bit of like a hallmark of like the VHS films, and I love that it's used to great use here, just because the whole vibe of this band called they're called Rack, and it's an acronym for, not for like any statement, but for like the band members, because like the band is, it's Rachel, Anchor, I believe, and Chris and Caleb. Together we are Rack. So it's absurd, but just like the whole, and this is like the best aspect of VHS 99, is that it feels like characters who are within that element, where there's a hangout element to it. Because like for setting up these characters, where it's like kind of like the found footage format, where they're recording with a VHS camera, you have to make it believable that they're just kind of like hanging out and just like, hey, we're going to go down here in the darkness, we're going to have fun, we're going to reenact this. And it works. It works surprisingly well. So it was off to a great start, and I was looking forward to what came next. So the next short is a bit more of like a standard one. This is probably, at least for me, this was probably the weakest one, but the weakest entry is still like a lot of fun. So this is Suicide Bid. And it's basically about a college freshman who's going through a hazing ritual where she has to spend the night in a coffin that gets put in the ground. And the prank that the sorority is counting on is that, they're going to unleash like some spiders in there, and she's gonna be like, oh, gross, spiders, and I'm trapped. And that alone is creepy. And the fact that it's being filmed is creepy enough. But then the undead come into the picture, and all of a sudden it's not just one person in a coffin, and it gets creepier from there. And it's a very simple concept, and I guess I don't so much dig the atmosphere here as much as I dig like the simplicity of having a person trapped inside a coffin. Like, because like in terms of like a found footage film like that, you are going to draw comparisons to other films where people have been trapped in a coffin, with stuff like Buried, and to a sci-fi extent, a film like Oxygen, that kind of like bottle film. So on a simplicity level, I kind of like the idea. And the execution is not half bad. I like the fact that like kind of they cut away just at the perfect point where the supernatural forces are going to enter the coffin and kind of like drag the next person down with them, and how there's like a deal you have to make with the dead in order to survive the night. So yeah, not a bad short for, and let that sink in. Like this was probably my least favorite short, and it's still pretty good. The next short is probably going to be a lot of people's favorites, especially those who grew up watching Nickelodeon. So the short is called Ozzy's Dungeon. It's directed by Flying Lotus, and this entry, it's in two parts. So the first part, it starts off on the taping of like a Double Dare show. So if you might remember, so like the 90s kids will get this, but Double Dare was like a game show that had physical challenges where you would you do stuff where you'd have to get your hands in slime, and you'd go through giant mouths and pick boogers out of giant noses and get pies in the face, all this gross physical challenge stuff. And this film kind of leans into kind of like the darkness behind that concept, because some people have done exposés on these game shows about how there would be like, they'd have to film so many episodes a day. There'd be accidents on sets. It would smell bad with all of like the materials that they would have to use for like the, like the food and stuff like that. And this is like a common thing with like game shows in general. Like game shows would film like tons of episodes, like 2 to 3 episodes a day. And especially if those shows involve like food with stuff like supermarket sweeps, they'd smell horrible on the set. And this one, this entry kind of leans into it by having this game show called Ozzy's Dungeon. And you can tell that there's like a bias with like the host here. Like the host is meant to be obnoxious and over the top, which is very par for the course for like those early 90s game shows. And yeah, like he addresses this finalist who's from Detroit, this black girl from Detroit, and he obviously looks down on this kid. He's not hoping that this kid will win. And at one point, the kid has an accident on set. And the accident involves her leg being brutalized. I believe like you can see like the bone coming out. There's like blood everywhere. And it feels like this is like a blooper tape or like a tape that they weren't going to show anyone, because this would not make it on the air. You would not show this. But then, like I said, that's the first part. The second part cuts to 1999, in which the family of this child tracks down the host, kidnaps him, takes off his clothes, and forces him to go through an obstacle course, but in kind of like an obstacle course that'd be more akin to like Jigsaw. So it's like, oh, you like torturing our daughter? Well, here, you can go through this obstacle course that involves poison and poop. So let's see if you survive that. And it gets grotesque from there, and you start questioning like, how much torture should befall this guy, and it gets even weirder when there's a paranormal element thrown in there with the dark secret of Ozzy's Dungeon in general. So yeah, it's definitely one of the more gruesome entries. But yeah, like for touching on like that Double Dare aspect, that it was bizarre and actually surprisingly a lot of fun. The next short is called The Gawkers, and it's about a group of teenage boys who are trying to hack the webcam of their next door neighbor, who is a hot girl that they're trying to spy on. And much like Shredding, this is a film where they try to build up the vibe as best they can, like make the characters feel relatable. It feels like they try a little bit too hard in some parts. Like at one point, they bring up the fact that, someone is like talking about the Millennium Bug and how they think that all the networks are going to go down. And that kind of made me think that that's where this entry was going to go, because like their whole deal is they got to hack a webcam. And my thought was, oh great, is it going to be like the computer's going to come to life, or like the Y2K bug's going to infect them? But no. As it turns out, there's a monster that's thrown into the mix that turns this into a slasher film. And I guess you're like, for those who haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it, just because like the monster that they do encounter is not one you would expect. Like it thematically, it fits for this short, but it's not one that you would expect for like a horror film in suburbia. So it was a nice touch. It's creepy because it's a bunch of kids who want to spy on a woman who's undressing, but they get their comeuppance. Karma comes back to bite them in the ass. So you don't feel too bad that they get gored and tortured by the monster who comes for them. So there's that. And then finally we have the last entry, which is honestly kind of rides a great balance between like dark occultish stuff and comedy. So the entry is called To Hell and Back. And this one takes place on New Year's Eve of 1999, in which there's a dark ritual for like a coven of witches, in which they want to, when they basically want to like make someone into a vessel that'll trap a demon so that they can kill the demon. Unfortunately, during the ceremony, the two guys filming it who thought like, oh man, they're going to sacrifice it. This is going to be a New Year's ritual. We got to film this. They accidentally, during the ceremony, get sent to hell. And they try to find their way out of hell while filming it the entire time, while trying to, be there for each other and make sure that both of them get out alive. And it's... it would sound like this is like the darkest short, but it actually finds a decent amount of comedy in it, especially like the ultimate punchline of when they finally do find their way out of hell. But also because of like the great performance of I'm trying to remember like the demon they encounter here. Like she she's such a what's it, Mabel. They encounter like this creature in hell called Mabel, who's kind of like the best way to describe her is that she's like a female Gollum, where she's like yes, I will take you to the to the next stage. And she kind of has like the wittiest lines. She's like I know my way around hell. Come on, guys, quit messing around with the demons. Don't stare at the ones who are eating guts. It's fine. And she's so adorable. She's so much fun, and I like the fact that like the guys are overreacting to her. It's like, why do you find this normal? She's like, I live here, you know. This is my jam. I don't know what's with you guys. So yeah, those are all the shorts within the VHS entry. You know, Shredding, Suicide Bid, Ozzy's Dungeon, The Gawkers, and To Hell and Back. And honestly, all 5 of them are really well assembled. I like the way they're all set up. Even like the they have like a little bit of an interstitial here where there's like a where there's like a little bit of like a small film with like army soldiers going on. It's weird, and I don't feel like it quite works, but it's not used as like the direct framing device for all of this. So which is a smart call, because like I have a feeling if they expanded on that bit too much, it would kind of lessen the film. Because honestly, the shorts on their own is just like a straight, you know, like here's this story, this story, this story, this story. They all work. Just amazing work from like the directors here, which I should definitely mention. So for like To Hell and Back, it was Vanessa and Joseph Winter. For the Gawkers, it was directed by Tyler McIntyre. Ozzy's Dungeon was directed by Flying Lotus. Suicide Bid was directed by Johannes Roberts, and Shredding was by Maggie Levin. They have all done a fantastic job here. I loved, even like Suicide Bid I wasn't as big on, but like I still appreciated the simplicity and the atmosphere. So in general, I really loved VHS 99, and it's making me look forward to like more entries. Like they did a similar thing with VHS 94. And I believe there's another one coming out called VHS. I believe it goes back in like the 1980s. It's called VHS 85. So yeah, the VHS anthology. It kind of has its hills and valleys, but this is definitely one of the hills and definitely one of the entries that you should check out. Like if you were to ask me like which films from the VHS saga you should watch, you should definitely watch VHS 2. That's still the gold standard for me. But immediately after that, if you want to ride that high and still have that kind of that thrill of using VHS format for weird and creative horror films, VHS 99 is the way to go. So yeah, VHS 99 is currently playing on Shudder. Go check it out. Love the send-up of American Pie with the webcam start. Yeah. That's the vibe I was going to do. I almost wanted to leave into like the American Pie vibe, but I don't want to mislead people, because nobody copulates with a pie or has like a sexual encounter on a webcam. So it's like it definitely has the American Pie vibe going for it, definitely, especially with the way that the teenagers talk openly about sex and wanting to see this nude woman and staying up all night and playing like their PlayStation 2 while waiting for her, you know. So I think it was a PlayStation 2 they were playing. Fairly certain. But yeah. So yeah, VHS 99. Great on Shudder. Whew. So there you go. There's all the movies we reviewed this week. All right. So let's get a little bit, let's play a little outro music here. And let's do a recap of everything we talked about on stream today. So, The Little Mermaid, the new live-action CGI remake by Rob Marshall, is not bad. Not bad. You know, in terms of like the scale of the Disney remakes, this one is on the better end, mostly just because like I feel like most of the visuals work, and Halle Bailey is amazing as Ariel, and Melissa McCarthy does also a great job as Ursula. So great casting saves this film from just being a standard retread of a remake. We talk about Fast X, the 10th Fast and the Furious film, and it's definitely my favorite one to date. And the long and short of it is, it's basically the Empire Strikes Back of the Fast and the Furious films. So if you love these movies, go check it out. If you haven't been catching up on them, probably don't, unless you're, you know, unless you've caught up on all of them. You definitely have to catch up on everything, starting with Fast 5. We also reviewed You Hurt My Feelings, an alright mixture of decent drama and comedy about a married couple struggling to be honest with their feelings for each other. It's adorable here and there, but it's a bit too saccharine and precious with its characters. That could use a little bit of satire. So, I guess the best way to say it, don't go in expecting like a Curb Your Enthusiasm style comedy, despite the way that it's set up, that it could have been one. So, it's a decent dramedy about a marriage. And we reviewed VHS 99. Definitely one of my favorite entries of the VHS franchise to date. Creative usage of the VHS format for staging weird horror short films set in 1999. And lastly, another thing worth mentioning, which we brought up at the beginning of the stream, is some streaming recommendations. So if you want to, if you can't make it out to the theater, want to check something else out, check out Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. If you haven't, it's on Paramount Plus right now. If you want some more horror, check out the documentary on the It miniseries called Pennywise. It's currently playing on Prime Video. It won the Chainsaw Award at the Shudder Chainsaw Movie Awards for the best documentary, so that should be reason enough to go watch it. And over on the Criterion Channel, they're celebrating the 100th birthday of director Seijun Suzuki. So why not celebrate it yourself by go watching one of his best films, Tokyo Drifter, a great Yakuza neo-noir film. And you can also watch pretty much most of his films are on there as well. So if you haven't seen them, go check them all out. But like Tokyo Drifter is a perfect introduction. So there you go. Whole bunch of stuff to watch at home. Oh, I also should probably mention the release. So yeah, Little Mermaid and You Hurt My Feelings will be in theaters this Friday. Fast X is currently playing in theaters right now. And VHS 99 is currently streaming on the Shudder horror streaming service. So go check all that out there. Thank you so much, Stuck, for... I'm getting my... Wait a minute. I'm getting the... Shoot. I'm trying... Wait, no, Sorry, I'm struggling. We are experiencing technical difficulties at the moment. There we are. Right as you say great stream, I screw up the credits like that. So thank you so much for tuning in. I will have individual reviews up on the YouTube channel of everything that we talked about here. If you would like to read the written reviews, you can go to movieswithmark.com, filminquiry.com, or twincitiesgeek.com. In particular, I have the Fast X review over on movieswithmark.com, and my review of The Little Mermaid is on filminquiry.com, which gets picked up by Rotten Tomatoes, so that should be on there soon as well. So there you go. What a stream. So in the coming weeks, what are we about? I'll see if I can catch up in about 2 weeks, and what'll we be reviewing then? Oh, we're going to be catching up on, I know for certain, we're going to be seeing Asteroid City, the new Wes Anderson film. I'm actually seeing that tomorrow, actually. So I'll have to check on the review embargo to see when we can talk about that, but I'm pretty sure within 2 weeks we'll be able to talk about it. And we'll be in June by that point, so we got a lot to talk about. We'll probably end up talking about the new Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse film, the sequel. It's not Into the Spider, it's Across the Spider-Verse. Pretty sure it is. And I'll see if I can get around to talking about the horror comedy film The Blackening. That, and there'll be other streaming films that we can talk about as well. So we'll try to find stuff there. Like, I definitely want to talk about VHS 99. Because I mentioned that on the last stream. It's like, I was really digging it, so we had to talk about that. So we'll see what else we got. Oh, there are some other films some smaller films that have been catching up. I want to talk about. I definitely want to talk about No Bears, the Iranian film that's been considered one of the best films of last year, which is currently on the Criterion channel. So if you want to check that out ahead of time, it's over there. And I also want to talk about The Five Devils, one of the better films that came out of France last year. That's currently playing on Mubi. So I'll try to see if I can squeeze those in next time to see how much time we have. So, thank you all for attending this stream. If you liked it, well, there's a button to show how much you liked it. It's the big thumbs up down there. If you want to see more of this stuff, more early reviews and movie review streams like this, be sure to subscribe. I always do these streams about bi-weekly, I guess. I guess in this case it was a little bit tri-weekly, but, you know, sometimes, you know, life catches up with you. So yeah, we'll be back with more movie reviews, so be sure to like, subscribe. If you want access to additional videos, I have a Patreon where I release audio early there, and I also write a lot more about movies and cartoons over on there as well. I'm writing a book about Saturday morning cartoons, so you can catch up on that there as well. So yeah, thank you for watching, so I will catch you all next time. Have a Megaforce day, everyone. Happy May and enjoy your summer.